The world of fine dining is supposed to be a delicate theater. It runs on unspoken rules, the quiet ballet of servers gliding between tables, and a mutual respect between guest and host. But sometimes, the curtain gets torn down by an act so shocking, so brazen, that the entire performance just grinds to a halt. This is a story about a night like that. It's about a single, calculated act of cruelty born from pure prejudice and arrogance. It's the story of a waitress who thought she was putting a customer in her place, but instead, was sealing her own fate in a city that forgets nothing and forgives even less. Now, this is a fictional story, a cautionary tale about how you can never really know who you're dealing with. Hook, the glass of ice water felt heavy in Chloe's hand, a weapon disguised as a drink. Across the linen-draped table, the pregnant woman, Isabella, just watched her with weary, patient eyes. For the last hour, Chloe had waged a one-sided war of insults and slights against a customer she had condemned the moment she walked in. The restaurant, Lopali, was a cathedral of quiet opulence, where the city's elite came to whisper deals. But tonight, its sacred silence was about to be shattered. With a flick of her wrist, fueled by a bitter, inexplicable rage, Chloe turned the glass upside down. Ice and water cascaded over Isabella's head, a sudden, shocking waterfall drenching her hair, her face, and the front of her elegant silk maternity dress. For a moment, the only sound was the clatter of ice cubes hitting a designer handbag. Then, an absolute, tomb-like silence fell over Lopali. Every fork froze mid-air. Every conversation died. Every eye in the room was fixed on the drenched, pregnant woman and the waitress standing over her with a look of cold, ugly triumph. Section 1, The Escalation. An hour earlier, the evening had started like any other at Lopali. The air smelled of truffle oil and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow, making diamonds sparkle. Chloe moved through this world with a practiced, resentful efficiency. She'd been a waitress here for 2 years, long enough for her awe to curdle into a simmering jealousy. She didn't see the patrons as people, but as caricatures of wealth, men with watches worth more than her car and women with handbags that could pay her rent for a year. Her smile was a mask. When Isabella walked in, Chloe's internal alarms went off. Isabella was stunning, her skin a rich, deep brown that seemed to glow under the soft lights. She carried her 7-month pregnancy with an easy grace, wearing a simple but clearly expensive emerald green silk dress. She had a reservation under the name Isabella Costello, but Chloe looked at her with open skepticism. She scanned the list slowly, deliberately making Isabella wait, before finally muttering, "This way." She led her not to a prime table by the windows, but to a cramped spot near the bustling kitchen entrance. It was a petty, subtle power play, and it was only the beginning. Isabella sensed the chill but said nothing. She'd been looking forward to this night for weeks. With her husband, Marco, out of town, it was her last chance for a quiet meal at their favorite restaurant before their first child arrived. She just wanted some peace. She wanted the famous truffle risotto. Settling into her seat, she smiled politely at Chloe, a smile that wasn't returned. The campaign of disrespect began. 10 minutes passed, and Isabella still had no water. Chloe bustled past her table half a dozen times, pointedly ignoring her raised hand to instead fawn over a table of rowdy finance brothers. When she finally did approach, it was with an air of deep impatience. "Ready?" she snapped. "Yes, thank you," Isabella said, her voice soft but clear. "Could I please start with some still water and the bread service?" Chloe's eyes flickered with annoyance, as if the request were a massive burden. "Fine," she clipped, and strode away. The water didn't arrive for another 15 minutes. The bread never came at all. Isabella watched Chloe deliver warm bread baskets to every other table. She watched her refill other people's water glasses and laugh at their jokes. To everyone else, Chloe was the perfect server. To Isabella, she was a ghost of hostility, appearing only to make her feel more unwelcome. Thirsty and tired, Isabella tried again, a little more firmly this time. "Excuse me, miss?" Chloe stopped and walked slowly to the table. She leaned in, her voice a low, condescending hiss. "You know, if you can't afford to be here, you shouldn't have made a reservation. We have a certain clientele to maintain." The insult was so direct, so nakedly prejudiced, it took Isabella's breath away. She looked at Chloe's tight, angry face and saw a deep, unreasoning bigotry. Still, she held her composure. "Stay calm for the baby," she thought. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Isabella said evenly. "I just wanted to order my meal. And I would still very much like that glass of water." Chloe's lips tightened into a venomous smirk. Isabella's calm refusal to be baited seemed to infuriate her more than anything. "Oh, you want water?" Chloe sneered, her voice rising just enough for nearby tables to hear. "Feelin' a little hot? You know what? You're right. You've been waiting so patiently. Let me get you that water. Right away." She spun on her heel and marched to the service station. She grabbed a tall glass, filled it to the brim with ice and water, her movements jerky and aggressive. The other servers watched, sensing something was very wrong. The manager, Gerard, was busy at the front, completely oblivious. Chloe returned to the table, her face a mask of malicious intent. The adjacent tables had fallen quiet, caught by the tension. Isabella looked up, expecting a glass to be slammed down. She never imagined what would happen next. With a final, hateful look, Chloe dumped the entire glass of ice water directly onto her head. Section 2, The Aftermath and the Call. The shock was a physical blow. Isabella gasped as freezing water soaked her hair, ran down her face, and seeped into her dress. Ice cubes slithered down her neck, a final, cold violation. She sat there trembling, not from the cold, but from sheer, stunning humiliation. The entire restaurant was silent. Chloe stood over her, the empty glass in hand, a smug smile on her lips. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with fake clumsiness. "My hand must have slipped." But her eyes gleamed with victory. She had finally broken the calm, elegant woman. The spell was broken by a collective gasp. The manager, Gerard, came sprinting from the front, his face a mask of horror. "Oh my God! Ma'am! I am so sorry," he stammered, rushing to Isabella's side with napkins. "Chloe! What in God's name did you do?" Chloe just shrugged, her arrogance unshaken. "It was an accident, Gerard." She was making a fuss. "An accident?" A man from a nearby table boomed, standing up. "We all saw you. That was deliberate. It was disgusting." Gerard's face went from pale to ashen. He knew this was a catastrophe. He turned to Chloe, his voice shaking with fury. "You are fired, Chloe. Get your things and get out of my restaurant. Now." For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed Chloe's face. But her arrogance quickly returned. She'd find another job. "Fine," she spat, throwing the glass onto a tray. "I was tired of serving entitled snobs anyway." Through all of this, Isabella remained eerily calm. She accepted the napkins from Gerard, dabbing at her face. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. The shock was replaced by a cold, quiet resolve. Her husband, Marco, had taught her that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. And that revenge is a dish best served with absolute, life-altering precision. She slowly reached into her soaked handbag, pulled out her phone, miraculously dry, and unlocked it. She ignored Gerard's frantic apologies and found the first name on her favorites list. Chloe, halfway to the locker room, paused to watch. Who was she calling? Her mommy? A lawyer? A smirk returned to her face. The phone was answered on the first ring. Isabella's voice was low and steady. "Marco, honey," she said softly. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know you just landed." A pause. Yes, I'm at Lopali. There's been a little incident. She glanced at the puddle on the floor. A waitress was having a bad day. Another pause. No, I'm all right. The baby is fine. Just a little wet. She let out a small, weary sigh. Could you come? I think you should probably come. She listened for a moment longer, then said, okay. I'll be here. I love you. She ended the call and placed the phone on the table. She looked up at the terrified manager. My husband is on his way, she said, her quiet voice now carrying an ominous weight. Gerard was sweating. Of course, ma'am. Mr. Costello. Of course. We will take care of everything. But Chloe, overhearing the name, just laughed. Costello, she scoffed. Oh, this is rich. You called your husband. What's he going to do? Write a bad Yelp review? You people are all so dramatic. She had no idea. She had no idea that in this city, the name Costello wasn't associated with bad Yelp reviews. It was a name spoken in whispers in boardrooms and back alleys. A name that made judges nervous and police captains look the other way. It was a name that meant power, absolute and terrifying. And she had just poured ice water all over the wife of the man who owned it. Gerard tried to move Isabella to a private room, but she politely refused, remaining at her table like a silent monument to impending doom. The restaurant tried to return to normal, but it was impossible. The air was thick with dread. Chloe, curious, lingered by the service station, waiting to see this Mr. Costello. She pictured some loud, pot-bellied man in a cheap suit, ready to bluster and threaten. She was wrong. The grand doors of Lopali swung open, but it wasn't her husband who entered first. It was two large, broad-shouldered men in identical black suits. They didn't speak. They just stepped inside and scanned the room, their presence instantly changing the atmospheric pressure. They weren't security, they were an announcement. And then, Marco Costello walked in. He was nothing like Chloe had imagined. He was tall, lean, and moved like a panther in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than she made in 6 months. His face was a study in controlled intensity. But it was his eyes that held the true power, dark, cold, and seeming to suck all the warmth out of the air. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was quiet, contained, and more menacing than a dozen screaming men. Gerard the manager felt a wave of nausea. He knew exactly who Marco Costello was. Costello owned hotels, shipping companies, and, it was rumored, a significant portion of the city's underworld. He was a phantom, rarely seen but always felt. And he was standing in the lobby. Marco's cold gaze swept the room until it landed on his wife. The glacial expression on his face instantly melted, replaced by pure, undiluted concern. He strode directly to her, knelt beside her chair, and gently cupped her face. Isabella, mia cara, he said, his voice a low rumble meant only for her. Are you all right? Did anyone hurt you? I'm fine, Marco, she whispered, a single tear of relief escaping. Just cold. Marco took off his heavy suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. He looked at her drenched dress, the puddle on the floor, and the empty water glass. His eyes hardened again. He stood up slowly, his gaze landing squarely on the terrified manager. What happened? Marco's voice began quiet, to stammer, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. On behalf of Lopali, I am so deeply sorry. It was a rogue employee, she has been terminated, I assure you, on the spot. It was a disgusting, unacceptable. Marco raised a single hand. The babbling stopped. Chloe watched from the shadows, her heart beginning to pound. This was not what she expected. The deference, the fear, the man's chilling aura of command. The name clicked again. Costello. A cold dread seeped into her bones. Marco's eyes scanned the room. The employee who has been terminated, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Is she still here? Gerard swallowed hard. With a trembling hand, he pointed a finger towards the service station. There, he squeaked. Her name is Chloe. For the first time, the full, undivided attention of Marco Costello landed on the waitress who had insulted his wife. He turned slowly until he was facing her directly. Every ounce of Chloe's smugness and pride evaporated under that cold, silent stare. She felt pinned, dissected, and condemned. Section 4, The Reckoning. Marco started to walk toward Chloe, his steps unhurried and measured. The two men in suits subtly shifted, creating an invisible perimeter. The other diners seemed to hold their breath. This wasn't a restaurant anymore, it was a courtroom. Chloe wanted to run, but her feet were cemented to the floor. Her mind, so quick with snide remarks moments ago, was now a buzzing blank. He stopped a few feet from her. Your name is Chloe? He asked. It sounded like a death sentence. Chloe could only manage a pathetic nod. Tell me what happened, Marco said. It was a command. The lie came automatically. It was an accident, she stammered. I tripped. The glass slipped. I can't believe I was fired for an accident. Marco's expression didn't change. He turned his head to the man at the nearby table who had spoken up earlier. You, Marco said. You saw it. Was it an accident? The man, a developer who knew exactly who he was talking to, sat up straight. No, sir, he said, his voice clear. It was not an accident. She was berating the lady for a good half hour. It was deliberate. Malicious. Marco's eyes returned to Chloe. Her face crumbled. I was just having a bad day, she whispered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to her. She was. I thought. You thought what? Marco's voice now had an edge of steel. You thought because she was a black woman, she didn't belong here. You thought because she was pregnant and alone, she was an easy target. You judged her. And you decided she deserved to be publicly humiliated. Each word was a surgical cut, laying her ugly prejudice bare for the entire room to see. Chloe began to sob, not from remorse, but from sheer terror. Please, she begged, I'm sorry. I need this job. No, Marco said flatly. You don't deserve this job. He turned to Gerard. I was told she was fired. That's a start. But it's not a solution. The problem is a culture you've allowed to fester here. So you're fired, too. Gerard looked like he'd been shot. Mr. Costello, please. I have a family. So do I, Marco said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And she, he nodded toward Isabella, is my family. My entire world. And you allowed her to be assaulted in your dining room. He turned to one of his men. Get my lawyer on the phone. Find out who owns Lopali. I don't care about the price. I'm buying it. A new shockwave hit the room. This wasn't a complaint or a lawsuit. It was an acquisition. He was buying the entire building as a statement. The man in the suit was already on his phone. Yes, Mr. Alastair. Mr. Costello has an urgent acquisition request, a restaurant called Lopali. Marco then turned back to Chloe, who was weeping uncontrollably. He took out his own phone and made another call. It's me, he said. I have a name for you. A waitress. Chloe, what's your last name? D. Davis, she sobbed. Chloe Davis, Marco repeated into the phone. Currently at Lopali. I want you to send her name and photo to every restaurant, hotel, bar, country club, and catering company in this city. I want her blacklisted. And I mean blacklisted so she can't get a job serving coffee at a gas station. Am I clear? He listened for a moment. Good. He hung up. With one 30-second phone call, he had erased her career. But he wasn't done. His eyes fell on the mess on the floor. "Clean it up," he said to Chloe. She stared at him, confused. "What?" "You made the mess," he said, his voice implacable. "You will clean it up. On your hands and knees. Now." Gerard started to protest. "Mr. Costello, we have staff for." "You have no staff," Marco cut him off. "You're fired. And she is going to clean it up." One of Marco's men placed a bucket and rags on the floor next to Chloe. The humiliation was absolute. In front of the wealthy patrons she had envied, Chloe Davis got down on her hands and knees. Her sobs were the only sound as she began to wipe up the water, picking up ice cubes with trembling fingers. Isabella watched, a pained look on her face. She placed a hand on Marco's arm. "Marco, that's enough," she said softly. "She's learned her lesson." Marco looked down at his wife, his face softening only for her. "My love, some lessons need to be unforgettable. Disrespect to you is a wound to me." He then bent down and whispered to Chloe, "When you are finished, you will go to my wife, you will look her in the eye, and you will apologize. And you will hope she is a better person than you are. Because your future depends on it." Conclusion: Chloe finished cleaning, her uniform ruined, her face stained with tears. She stumbled to her feet and gave a broken apology to Isabella, who simply nodded. Then, Marco Costello gently led his wife out of the restaurant, his jacket still over her shoulders, his men following behind. They left behind a scene of utter devastation, Gerard, his career over, the patrons, in stunned silence, and Chloe Davis, left standing in a puddle of her own making. The story of that night became an urban legend in the city's service industry, a terrifying bedtime story for arrogant waiters. It's a fictional tale, of course. There are no public records of a mafia boss named Marco Costello buying a restaurant on the spot. Real-world laws would make that citywide blacklisting nearly impossible. But the story stuck, not because it's true, but because it's a powerful narrative about consequences. It's a cautionary tale that hits home because it speaks to a universal truth. You never know who you're messing with, and a single moment of cruelty can have a lifetime of repercussions. Weeks later, a haggard-looking Chloe was turned away from a greasy spoon diner. The manager just looked at her application photo, then back at her, and shook his head. "Sorry, can't help you." Marco Costello's network was long, and his memory was longer. Chloe had wanted to feel powerful by humiliating someone. Now, she was truly powerless, a pariah in the only industry she'd ever known, forever paying the price for one unforgivable act. CTA, the consequences Chloe faced were absolute. Some might say it was karmic justice. Others might argue the punishment was a frightening abuse of power that went way too far. What do you think? Was Marco's response justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, share this story. Don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic stories where pride comes before a spectacular fall.